So let's talk about Final Blackout, a novel by Ron Hubbard. So unlike Battlefield Earth or Mission Earth, this was a series of novels from his pulp fiction days. So the 40s, and he wrote this as a couple of in a serialized format, a couple of stories that appeared in science fiction magazines of the time. So this is the other two, like I said, the other two books I talked were late written. Hubbard wrote his pulp fiction days and then he didn't write, and then in the 80s or late 70s early 80s he put out Battlefield Earth and the Mission Earth series, right, about the time of his death. So it's kind of two different sets. So it's interesting reading Final Blackout, and you'll see that there are themes, and mainly the one theme of the near perfect hero that you see in those later novels as well. So it's my opinion that the main character of Final Blackout is kind of a prototype for these other characters, for Johnny Goodboy Tyler and Heller and all these guys. So let's just talk about the plot synopsis here. So Final Blackout is set in the future, and it revolves around the rise of a man called the Lieutenant. Well, I should probably say the Lieutenant, because he is. This is set in England, so it's set after World War One. There's been 30 years of the lieutenant leads his little ragtag outfit. I think it's called a brigade, but it's not really a brigade size. But there's been 30 years of atomic, biological, and conventional warfare. Europe is ravaged. There's quarantines, and the whole place is just been destroyed. So the lieutenant is the perfect hero, and he rallies his men. He leads them to victory, looks after them, and eventually overthrows the corrupt government and military leadership to become the dictator of England. But he's a positive he's a dictator, but he's not he's the perfect dictator, the philosopher king, the one who looks after his people and doesn't abuse them or anything like that. So it's quite interesting. I like this novel and recommend it. And it's not, if you look at it, you can see it's nowhere near the Battlefield Earth monstrosity or anything like that. It's a normal sized novel. So yeah. So there's some interesting. It runs for 30 years, so I believe it's set from 1920 to 1960, because there's an incident later where a U.S. battleship comes into the over to the across the Atlantic to investigate what's going on, and I believe that Kennedy is the oh no, it can't be. This was written in 1940, but I believe it's around the 60s, and at the time, of course, the Americans are they have been not been they have not been ravaged by this war. It's been stuck over there, so they're highly, much more technologically advanced than everyone else is. I don't want to give away any more of the plot, but I think it's a good novel, and it's not, like I said, it's not super huge, so you can actually get through it. It's critically acclaimed as positively, as opposed to there's a lot of negative critic comments about the Mission Earth series especially, but also Battlefield Earth to a sense. But I think it's worth reading. Of Hubbard's novels, I would recommend Final Blackout and Battlefield Earth. And go with Final Blackout. It's a normal size novel, and if you can get through that and you like it, and you'll get more and more complicated stuff with that, then maybe try Battlefield Earth. That's probably the best way to go about it. So I'm interested to see your comments, and we're gonna what you think about Final Blackout. That's it for the novels of Hubbard. Those are the main ones that I've read. The Battlefield Earth, the Mission Earth series, and the Final Blackout. I haven't read any of his other stuff, so that's all I'm going to talk about for that. I'm going to talk a little bit about. Let's talk next about a little bit about Hubbard himself. So let's talk about L. Ron Hubbard, the man, the myth, the legend. So just to get you a flavor of L. Ron, let's read this about the author page from Battlefield Earth, the copy I have. Just bear with me. Born in 1911, the son of a U.S. naval officer, L. Ron Hubbard grew up in the great American West and was acquainted early with the rugged outdoor life before he took to the sea. The cowboys, Indians, and mountains of Montana were balanced with an open sea, temples, and the thongs of the Orient as Hubbard traveled through the Far East as a teenager. By the time he was 19, he had traveled over 250,000 sea miles and thousands on land as he prodded and asked and recorded his experience in a series of diaries mixed with story ideas. Returning to the United States, Hubbard's insatiable curiosity and demand for excitement sent him into the sky as a pilot, where he quickly earned the reputation for his skill and daring before he turned his attention again to the sea. This time it was four-masted schooners and voyages into the Caribbean as Hubbard mixed adventure and education with an education that was to serve him later as a typewriter. Okay, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. I mean, is that a lot for a guy to do? You know, before he was 19, he'd already traveled 250,000 sea miles. You know, he's done all this. He's an outdoorsman. He's a great seaman. Then he comes back and he's, 19, 20, 21. He's a pilot. I call bullshit. Pardon my French. Hubbard's about himself reads like one of the heroes in his story, like Johnny Goodboy Tyler or one of these guys. Am I sure? Can I prove it? No, but it sounds like a load of crap. There's no way anybody could do all that stuff. So, just be aware that, Hubbard is a, perhaps, you could charitably say that he exaggerates about his abilities and what he does, or you could just say he's a liar. Either or, but the guy, it's just too much for one man to have done. So based on that, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Scientology. So my apologies to John Travolta or Tom Cruise if you're listening, but Scientology is a cult. It's got all the aspects of a cult. Just look into it. Watch Leah Remini's documentary on it. I mean, it's got all the aspects of a cult. I can't prove it, but watch my video on Stranger in a Strange Land, and I'm convinced that, Hubbard knew Heinlein, they knew each other. They corresponded back and forth. I'm convinced that, Hubbard probably read Stranger in a Strange Land and looked at the church of all worlds and said, he said, hey, Heinlein, how did you think of that, Robert? How did you think of that Church of All Worlds? Oh, how'd you design that religion? Oh, I just thought about this and that, and yeah. Oh, it doesn't look so hard. I bet I could design a religion too. Hubbard said it's probably something like that. And Heinlein might have said, no, you couldn't. He goes, oh yeah, watch me, hold my beer. And he came up with Scientology. It's my own personal opinion. I could be completely wrong, but I'm convinced that Hubbard, maybe on his deathbed, said to his Scientology buddies, oh, by the way, I made the whole thing up. And they're just like, you know what? We're just going to forget that he ever said that, what his last words were. Anyway, so a couple of, I mentioned this earlier, but a couple of themes of that go throughout Hubbard's books. I always trying to say Howard through Hubbard's books. Number one, it's the perfect hero. which is kind of like he was, right? Being able to do all these amazing things even early in his life. So his heroes, his the main characters of the stories seem to be, the near perfect man, good in every way, incorruptible, always looking out for others, amazing abilities in just about anything. The other is, his hatred of psychiatrists. So the word is that when he wrote his Dianetics book, he wanted to get a stamp of approval from the American Psychiatric Association, and they basically said, yeah, there's no scientific proof that any of the stuff you say in this book is true, and that barely pissed him off. And then he proceeded to savage psychiatrists in anything he wrote after. For example, in Battlefield Earth, there's a mention of the Cyclos are the way they are because they are under the control of these. There's a priest class, priest / ruling class within this on the Cyclo homeworld, and they're called chitrists. It's basically, a shortened version of psychiatrist, excuse me. And so they're made to be evil charlatans and horrible things. They've the reason that the Cyclos are so much sociopaths because they put a little chip in their head. It's supposed to make working more fun for them so that they can work them harder. So yeah, hates psychiatrists like you would not believe. So so that's about it for L. Ron Hubbard. He's an interesting character. He with his exaggeration of his life story, his he's a guy who started his own religion. He's the founder of his own religion. He is Valentine Michael Smith in real life, and like I said, maybe that's what he was looking to do. Maybe that's what he was trying to do. But anyway, check out his stuff. It's interesting. Don't get caught into the Scientology or the Dianetic stuff. Don't just read anything by him, because a lot of the stuff that you'll see his Dianetic stuff, and that's when I was a kid, I was like, is this? I looked at it, I'm like, is this a Hubbard book? Maybe I want to read it. I looked at it and I read the back. I'm like, oh, this doesn't sound like fiction. So I didn't touch it. Thank goodness for that. But try out his main stories. Try out Final Blackout. I recommend that one for sure. And then if you like that style and you think you can get through 1,000 pages, go for Battlefield Earth. And then if you want to torture yourself or be able to say that you read the only decology ever written, then go with the Mission Earth series. But be prepared to slug through that. All right. Thanks a lot. I'm interested in your comments about Hubbard or any of his works and your thoughts on them. Put them in the comments. See you next time.